Number 5. The Truck Stop Serial Killer. It is the summer of 1985. Wham and Madonna ruled the #1 spots in music. The Goonies and Back to the Future had just been released in the cinema. A 15-year-old girl by the name of Vanessa Veselka had run away from her home in New York City after having several fights and emotional arguments with her mother. She was joined by a 21-year-old boyfriend. They made it to South Carolina, then parted ways. Her boyfriend gave her $60 to get by with. She was heading south on Interstate 95 when she stopped at a truck stop for some supplies and to look for cars in which she could hitchhike in. At the truck stop there was just a single truck. The driver was a 45-year-old man wearing a cotton button-down with the sleeves rolled up over his biceps. She asked him,
"Can I get a ride?"
She then got into the truck and they headed out onto the road. He then began to ask the regular hitchhiker questions, such as,
"Where are you heading? What's your name?"
But once they got further into the trip, he completely changed. He became silent and started fidgeting in his seat, and also had a blank expression on his face. He then started asking her strange questions such as,
"Did you hear about the dead girl the police found in a dumpster a few weeks back?"
He also asked,
"You ever hear about the Laughing Death Society? Yeah, us folks laugh at death."
He then pulled the truck into a road in the middle of the woods. He pulled out a hunting knife and told her,
"Get in the back of the truck!"
She began to panic and told him,
"Please don't hurt me. I won't go to the cops if you let me free."
It then went silent and he said one word.
"Run!"
She swung the truck door open and sprinted out for dear life. She ran 100 yards without looking back. She then hid in the woods. She crouched on twigs and breathed into her shirt to muffle the sound. She stayed there until she saw his truck drive away. She was in shock and walked back to the same road the truck stop was on and started to hitchhike again. But this time she made it to her destination safely. She never went to the police and didn't tell anybody for years. The man who attempted to kill her is believed to be serial killer Robert Rhodes, who is currently serving life for murdering a 14-year-old girl in 1990. He has also recently admitted to killing 2 hitchhikers in 1990. His crimes can also be linked to a decade of rape and torture. His truck has also been linked with 50 unsolved murders. Number 4. The Green River Killer. It was November 1982 in Seattle. Rebecca Gard, a telemarketer, had just finished work and was heading home. It started to pour down with rain. She walked to the bus stop and waited there for 10 minutes. The bus was taking forever and she was tired of waiting in the rain, so she began to hitchhike. She flagged down a Dodge pickup. The driver was a 33-year-old man who looked very boring and dull. Once they started driving, she offered him sex for $20, as she wanted to buy drugs when she got home. He accepted the offer and at this point, she started to sense something odd about the man, so she asked to see some identification. He agreed to this and showed her it. She was at ease at this point as she thought he may have been a police officer. They parked by a trailer park, but the man suggested they go into the woods for some privacy. They drove into the woods and both got out the car. This is when the man attacked her and tried to strangle her to death from behind. She pushed him into a tree which hurt him, and she managed to run to a nearby trailer for help. The man immediately got into his car and sped off. Due to her lifestyle and fear of the police, she waited 2 years to go to the police. It turns out that the man that was trying to kill her was dubbed as the Green River Killer. His name was Gary Ridgway, and in 2003 he confessed to the murders of 48 women. He is believed to have murdered over 60 women. Number 3. The Backpacker Murders. The Backpacker Murders were a spree of killings that occurred in New South Wales, Australia during the 1990s. There is known to be 7 victims. Some of them were hitchhikers. The first 2 victims are British backpackers Carolyn Clark and Joanne Walters. Their decaying bodies were found in a forest. Joanne had been stabbed 35 times. The third and fourth victims were Deborah Everest and James Gibson. They were also found in a forest. The discovery of James's body puzzled police as they found his backpack and camera 62 miles away, so he could have been hitchhiking or even kidnapped. The fifth victim was a German tourist by the name of Simone Schmidl. She was last seen hitchhiking on the 20th of January 1991. She was found with multiple stab wounds to her upper torso. Clothing was found at this scene, but it did not belong to her. The clothes was of the 6th victim, Anya Habshed. The body of her and her boyfriend were found on November 1993 in shallow graves. They had both been shot and stabbed to death. Anya was decapitated, and despite a long search, her head was never found. Her boyfriend was shot in the head 9 times. The killer was a man called Ivan Millat. He was arrested on the 22nd of May 1994 after a person positively identified him as a man who tried to tie him up and shoot him. 50 armed officers surrounded his house and broke in his door and then arrested him. They found several weapons in his house, including the gun that was used to kill his victims. They also found victims' clothing and belongings. He is currently serving 7 life sentences plus 18 years without parole. Number 2. Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Murders. Between 1972 and 1973, 7 hitchhikers were murdered in Santa Rosa, California. All of the victims were young women. There is a probable 8th victim, but her body has never been located. The murders became known as the Santa Rosa Murders. The first 2 victims were Maureen L. Sterling and Yvonne Weber. They were both aged 12. They vanished on the 4th of February 1972 at 4 p.m. when they were on their way home from the Redwood ice skating rink in Santa Rosa. On December 28, 1972, their skeletons were discovered down a 60-foot embankment in Sonoma County. The killer had kept their clothes and had taken 1 earring from each girl. The 3rd victim was Kim Allen. She was 19 and was the Santa Rosa Junior College student. She vanished on the 4th of March 1972 at 5 p.m. after she left work at the Larkspur Health Food Store and hitchhiked a ride to her home in Santa Rosa. Her nude body was found in a creek bed close to Enterprise Road in Santa Rosa. Marks around her throat showed that she had been strangled with a clothesline, and she also had marks around her wrist and ankles, which indicated that she had been tied up. The killer also took her clothes and 1 of her earrings. The 4th victim was Laurie Kershaw. She was 13 and was last seen alive on November 21, 1972 in a used slave market in Santa Rosa. On the 12th of December 1972, they found her body. She was completely nude and her neck had been broken. Her 1st and 2nd cervical vertebrae had been dislocated. The 5th victim was Carolyn Davis. She was 15. On July 15, 1973, she ran away from her grandmother's home in Garberville, California, and was last seen hitchhiking south. Then on July 31, 1973, her body was found completely nude in the exact same spot where the first 2 12-year-old victims were found. The post-mortem had found that she had been poisoned by styrocene. Styrocene is a highly toxic rat poison. The 6th victim was Therese Walsh. She was last seen on December 22, 1973, hitchhiking from Malibu Beach to her home in Garberville, California. Her body was found right near the spot where the 3rd victim was found. She had been tied up with a nylon rope, sexually assaulted, and then strangled and thrown into a creek. The 7th and last victim was Jeanette Kamalahi. She was 20 years old and was also a Santa Rosa Junior College student. She was last seen on April 25, 1972, hitchhiking north to Santa Rosa, but her body was never found. The identity of the killer, or killers, still remains a mystery. People believe it might have been a Zodiac killer or Ted Bundy, but I guess we'll never know. The killer might still be out there today. Number 1. Highway of Death. From 1970 to 1982, a killing spree of several hitchhikers took place on a secluded road in Australia. The road has become known as such names as the Highway of Death, Townsville Killing Fields, and Queensland's Wolf Creek. A serial killer dubbed as the real-life Hannibal Lecter has confessed to 14 murders that happened there. Most of his victims were women, but on the rare occasion some were men. Most of his victims were hitchhikers. The first 2 victims were Gabrielle Janicki, who was 18, and Michelle Riley, who was 16. They were both hitchhiking between Brisbane and the Gold Coast in 1973. Both of them were found with massive head injuries. Their cause of death were bludgeonings, and there was also signs of sexual assault. Another victim was named Margaret Rosewan. She was 19 and was hitchhiking a ride to a party. The killer had ripped her denim dress off and took her underwear. He beat her so badly that he broke her jaw, and the only way she could be positively identified was by using dental records. Another alleged victim is Tony Jones, who was a 32-year-old male and disappeared on the 3rd of November 1982 while hitchhiking through Queensland. His body was never found. The killer would use broken glass bottles to mutilate his victims. He was known to cut off breasts and gouge eyes out. Also on the same road, a British tourist was killed in 2001, but this was by a different killer. The 28-year-old was shot dead, then his girlfriend was tortured until she managed to escape. Some people believe that the hitchhiker murderer is still out there today, as some of the victims' cases are unsolved and still remain open. Thanks for watching. Remember never to hitchhike in Australia. That place is a bad place for hitchhikers. And also, remember to subscribe to keep updated with our newest videos. Goodbye.